Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Two Nates on Sports. My name is Nathan Simmons, and with me, as always, is Nathan Kwan. And today we have our special guest, Kevin Hahn, to talk about the NBA playoffs. And specifically, we're going to eulogize the Houston Rockets, who just finished their season this week in very much the opposite of a glorious ending. Nathan Kwan, take it away.
Glorious it was not. So this was the third time in my sports life that I remember my team going out in a blowout fashion when they were facing elimination. You have look back to 2005 Game 7 against the Mavericks, and the Rockets lost by 40. Of course, last year it was the Texans against the Chiefs, 30-0, and then this game. So it was just wire to wire. I was scared about this game going into it after what happened in Game 5 when they controlled it for the most part, but they didn't finish. And the team just looked completely gassed in the fourth quarter and overtime, and James Harden and the offense completely shut down. It reverted back to McHale ball. I mean, I've watched Houston teams do this over and over again, and especially this Houston Rockets team. When they feel like the other opponent is not as good as them, they psychologically and mentally kind of let up. And when Kawhi Leonard was announced that he would not be playing in Game 6, I got even more worried because that's just the nature of this team the last couple of years. And I think you have to start it with James Harden, who's supposed to be your leader and your superstar, who's supposed to be leading your team when all the chips are on the table and you're backed up against the wall. And the way he came out in Game 6 was absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion. You can go down swinging in that if you're struggling with your shot and the other team is just playing great defense on you, that's okay. Like, I can live with that. Like, everyone has their bad games, and sometimes your opponent is just better than you. But the way he went out in that game, completely disengaged, no effort whatsoever. He didn't take his first shot until the second quarter. He came out just kind of throwing the ball around, trying to get his teammates involved, but the passes were completely off the mark. And he just, like, for the whole game, I just kept waiting for him to put up like a 10-point run by himself because he's done that all year and it just never materialized. And it just looked like midway through the second quarter, he just said, I'm planning my vacation. Like, I'm packing it in. And this is what we saw last year when that team was 41-41 and got destroyed by the Warriors in the first round, where like they would just play a quarter or so and then it wouldn't be going well. They just completely give up. And that just bothers me so much because if you're not talented enough and you just get beat by a better team and you lose, I'm fine with that. Like, my favorite Houston Rockets team of all time is the 2009 team. That team didn't have Tracy McGrady. Yao Ming went out in the playoffs. Dikembe Mutombo went out, but they took the eventual champion Lakers to 7 games, and they fought for everything that they had with Aaron Brooks, Luis Scola, and that crew. And the Rockets team is so much more talent. You have a superstar player. You just can't give that sort of effort. And I think a bigger issue for Harden is we've seen this time and time again. It started in the 2012 finals against the Heat, where he completely just played a horrible series. And we've seen it in the past couple of years, Harden in the playoffs, how he struggled and just mentally has shut it down. And so I think that's worrying for Rockets fans. And it really, the fans can't get behind a player that just doesn't give it his all, especially when your season's on the line. And so, I mean, what did you guys think about what happened in Game 6, Kevin?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Harden just didn't show up Game 6. To be honest, I turned that game off midway through the second quarter. Pretty much knew the series was over by that point. The Rockets just didn't show up to play. And I believe Harden finished the game with 10 points and 6 turnovers, so not a very good note to end the season. But just to do a quick recap of the series, the Rockets started off Game 1 blowing the Spurs out in San Antonio by 27 points. And I think the key for the Rockets that game was the three-point shooting and the rebounding. They shot 44% from three and out-rebounded the Spurs 56-55. But then they dropped the next 2 games, only shooting 30% from three and getting destroyed on the boards by the Spurs, and also getting out-rebounded by 15 in Game 2 and 19 in Game 3. So that was a huge issue for them. Rockets then took Game 4, but Ney, obviously, he gets injured and is out for the rest of the series, which is a huge loss for the Rockets. And Game 5 was really a defining moment of the series. The game really went down to the wire in overtime, but the Rockets' offense in the fourth quarter And in overtime, like you mentioned earlier, it just reverted back to Mikal iso ball. And Harden also made 3 costly turnovers in that overtime that pretty much cost him the game. And on top of that, Kawhi sat out for most of the fourth quarter and overtime with the sprained ankle. So it was just a really demoralizing loss for the Rockets. And they were so close to taking that game too. The Spurs missed some open looks in the fourth quarter, and the Rockets could have capitalized on that, but their offense just didn't show up. And we all know what happened in Game 6. It was just a disappointing end to the Rockets season. But overall, I still believe the Rockets had a great regular season, getting 55 wins under Mike D'Antoni, as well as having the 3rd best record in the NBA. And they were also a real title contender this year. But they couldn't get to the conference finals this year, but I'm really looking forward to see how this current roster develops under D'Antoni next season.
Time for the Dallas fans' perspective. So I know I've been saying like pretty much all season that like this team sort of reminded me of the way that those like late 2000s Dallas teams were built, in which basically had like one superstar who was like very much well known for his offensive potential, and you've filled out the rest of the team with strong 3-point shooters, both among the starting lineup as well as the bench. That being said, I don't remember any other time in Dirk's career in the playoffs where he basically would shut down at the end. Honestly, I didn't really watch much of Game 6 because by the time I got back to like my apartment, it was already like towards the end of the second quarter, and it was already a blowout by that point. I mean, and I watched some of the highlights too, and it like, and basically what Quan said, I mean, Harden pretty much shut down. And I mean, I understand being like disappointed in what happened at during Game 5, especially getting blocked by Manu at the end there. But at the same time, like this series really was there for the Rockets to take, especially once Kawhi went down. I mean, and just the fact that James Harden wasn't able to really find that second year. And I mean, and again, I understand if he was gassed by the end, but I mean, it's the playoffs, man. I mean, and I talked with Quan about this, saying that like I genuinely thought that like the Houston Rockets would be heck of a lot more motivated, especially by Game 5, to at least take Game 6. That itself didn't even happen. And so, I mean, like, I really kind of question whether or not Harden is going to be able to lead a team to the finals, let alone win one. I mean, just look at Dirk. I mean, he's someone that, like, no matter what the game was, no matter how much they were outmatched by the other team, Dirk would always push through and try his best. And I don't remember any time where he would necessarily get blown out in the final game of the season. I mean, obviously, maybe unless like they were really, really, really outmatched. But I mean, like this Rockets team was not really outmatched by the Spurs talent-wise. Like I said, this series really was for the taking. And I mean, if they made a few more shots in Game 5, you know, I mean, like we could very easily see the Rockets be the ones playing the Warriors in the finals. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. I mean, it doesn't really take away from the regular season that the Rockets had this year. I mean, what they did with talent that they had, especially when coming into the season, everyone was discounting them and saying that they were going to be worse for losing Dwight Howard. Basically, they turn things around. They have the 3rd best record in the NBA, and they should be proud of what they've done. But I mean, like at this point, like I mean, what they really need is someone to push Harden more, and someone at least a strong veteran presence, I think would help. But I mean, I don't know. And maybe Harden's still like young enough where that he could possibly find that like hunger to like chase after a championship. But I mean, like this is really disconcerting what we've seen.
I mean, I will say for Harden, he was completely gassed this series. You could see it in his body language in Game 5 and throughout Game 6. The Rockets went small ball, and when they lost Nene, basically Harden had to play the post. He had to guard LaMarcus Aldridge, and that just wears on you when you have a 7-footer. I'm trying to post you up possession after possession, and I think that definitely wore him down. I think Mike D'Antoni deserves a little bit of criticism for all he did in the regular season. I think playing 7 guys this series, especially in Game 5, was really a mistake because they had no legs at the end of Game 5, and there was a carryover definitely into Game 6. And we talked about this last week a little bit in making adjustments because the Spurs defense was locking down the Rockets offense. And we saw kind of a little bit of better play in Game 4. I mean, they hit a lot more 3-pointers, but over time of Game 5 and all of Game 6, it just seemed like every pass was telegraphed, and San Antonio basically had the playbook of the Rockets, and there wasn't any adjustments of like taking some mid-range jump shots or running Gordon off some screens or anything. Just Game 6, you can't really blame D'Antoni. I always say close losses on the coach, blowout losses on the players. And I mean, every 50-50 ball, every hustle play went to the Spurs. And you got to credit Greg Popovich. I mean, he is the best coach in basketball for a reason. And what he's been able to do in getting the type of play he's gotten out of Danny Green and Jonathan Simmons, who play out of his mind this series, just all the credit to Pop. But I mean, going back to Harden, like, can you imagine like Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant or LeBron James, Magic Johnson going out like that? Just, I mean, you got to go down swinging, man. Like, you can't just, you got to face that adversity, and you have to know your team looks to you as the leader. If the leader has given up, then why am I as a Ryan Anderson or a Lou Williams? Like, why am I going to dive on the floor for that loose ball? Because like my leader's just standing at half court, just checked out, like ready for the offseason. And I get your point about motivation and veteran leadership. This team is very young. And I think when Nene went out, obviously he was still around the team, but he wasn't playing games. And so there's not a lot of old guys on the roster that get in Harden's ear, but also you're the leader. And it's having veterans to tell you what to do is nice, but in the end, it's up to you. You have to look in the mirror and say, where's my motivation here? Where's my sense of fight that I don't want to be embarrassed and go out like this? It doesn't seem like he cares. And that bothers me the most. When you're so supremely talented and you had a regular season like that and you just go out, you don't care. Why am I as a fan going to put on the playoff t-shirt? Why am I going to spend my hard-earned money to go watch you in person when you give that sort of effort? It's hard to get behind them. I mean, as you guys said, the team did have a good year. I do think that it was a horrible ending, but it was a great year. They surpassed all expectations. They were predicted anywhere from like 6th to 10th in the West, and they were number 3 seed. Mike D'Antoni deserves all the accolades and that he will get. And I think just looking ahead to the offseason, there's not a whole lot they can do. I think their only big free agent is Nene. And so that's going to be a discussion whether they want to bring him back. He's going to be 35 next year. Bobby Brown and Troy Williams are also free agents. Those are marginal players that didn't have the big impact. So I think they might bring back Williams because he showed a little bit of potential going down the stretch. But as far as offseason, they're capped out. They only have $7 million to spend, and I think they're probably going to bring back the same team. Serge Ibaka is a free agent, and he would be a dream with his 3-point shooting and his shot blocking at the rim. But I think it's going to take more than $7 million to get Serge Ibaka on your team, and so it's just going to be a discussion to see whether Daryl Morey tries to make a bigger deal. It's tough because the Warriors are so talented that it's going to be tough for this team to surpass that Warriors team, especially when Kevin Durant's on it.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you guys said. I think they're going to keep pretty much the same roster for next year. Sam Decker has really developed his game this season, and I'm looking forward to see how he breaks out next year. Also, Montrezl Harrell is a young guy I would like to see get more playing time. He's super athletic and can rebound, so that will definitely help the Rockets down low. But we could probably use a backup center, maybe get one in the second round in the draft, or maybe we can insert Zhou Qi, our second round draft pick from China last year. If he can put on some more muscle, maybe we can give him some playing time at the center spot. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, also Clint Capella, we should mention. He had a great series. In the first round, he really struggled with Oklahoma City, but when Nene went out against the Spurs, Capella turned up big, and he was a great shot blocker for them. So I'm really high. I mean, it was the first year Clint Capella was a starting center in the NBA, and I think there's still higher ceiling for him to grow as a player. And also Shinanu Onuaku, who was their first round pick this past year, he played most of the year in the D League, and so hopefully he'll have more of an impact as well going forward. the Rockets losing to the Spurs sets up a Western Conference Finals that a lot of people wanted last year between the San Antonio Spurs and the Golden State Warriors. The Spurs won the season series 2-1, but those two were the first game of the year and also a game in which both teams basically rested all their players. So, Kevin, how do you see this one setting up?
Yeah, so I think the Warriors are just sitting at home waiting for the next victim. They're well rested after sweeping the Blazers and the Jazz, going 8-0 in this playoff so far. But I think they'll have no problem taking care of a Spurs team, which has no Tony Parker and an injured Kawhi Leonard. And also, it seems the Warriors' offense is unstoppable at times in these playoffs, with Steph, Clay, and KD all having the potential to score over 30 points in one night and just having the potential to just take over the game and rain threes. And also, Draymond Green is giving you the defensive intensity that the Rockets lack down low. So that's also will pose a challenge to the Spurs. And to be frank, I don't think the Spurs offense, especially with Kawhi Leonard, who is not at 100%, they can really compete with the Warriors. So I'm going to say the Warriors take the series in 5, maybe 6 games. But yeah, I'm expecting the Warriors to go to the finals for a third straight time.
I have Warriors in 4. I mean, as much as like I respect like the Spurs and obviously what Popovich has done. I mean, like he's for pretty much a lot of all the reasons that you pointed out. I mean, Kawhi going in is not going to be 100%. I mean, obviously he's clearly the best player on the Spurs, and he's pretty much their go-to guy as a scorer. And if that guy's not 100%, you can only do so much. I mean, granted, LaMarcus Aldridge, I mean, he's trying to chase after a ring. And so, I mean, obviously he's going to be very, very motivated this series. And maybe he's able to turn back the clock to his Portland days. But that's still not going to be enough to beat Steph, Clay, Draymond, and Durant. I mean, I honestly, and yeah, they match up better with the Warriors than most might expect, just because of their post presence. But I mean, it's just even with that matchup advantage, I mean, like they're so disadvantaged when it comes to just scoring that it's just. I mean, I just don't see it being close. I will say this: as much as I love Durant, former UT alum, also screw him for kind of causing this like lack of parity. I mean, screw him for that weak ass move in joining the Warriors. I will say that.
Wholeheartedly agree there. I think it's going to be a compelling series to watch. It's the number 1 offensive team against the number 2 defensive team. And we saw what the Spurs defense did to the Rockets offense at times. It completely stymied them. And so I'm confident Greg Popovich will come out with a defensive game plan that will force the Warriors to actually play for 48 minutes and compete at a high level, because I don't think they even played at 100% for most of the first 2 rounds against Portland and Utah. But as you guys said, I think inside is a big key for the Spurs. Marcus Aldridge, if he plays like he did in Game 6, that was vintage Portland, LaMarcus Aldridge. And that could pose a problem for Golden State because, as we've talked about time and time again, they don't have a superior post presence. And Draymond Green, he's a great defender, but like the size of Aldridge, he can just shoot over the top of Green, like no problem. And also if Gasol plays as well as he did in protecting the rim and getting him some post touches as well, I think there's a big advantage with him against JaVale McGee and Zaza Pachulia. But I think the Warriors it's just too much shooting. I think Kawhi being gimpy hurts the Spurs' chances, and the Rockets really just struggled from 3 for most of that series. And you just can't shut down Thompson, Curry, Durant, Draymond. That's just too much. And I see the Spurs winning 1 or 2 games, but I think the Warriors will advance to the NBA Finals again. But let's talk about the East. The Washington Wizards and the Boston Celtics are going to a Game 7. That has been a back and forth series. The home team has won every single game, but it's really just been a great matchup between the guards, Isaiah Thomas and Avery Bradley for Boston, and John Wall and Bradley Beal for the Wizards. Kevin, how do you see this one turning out in Game 7, and who do you think has the advantage?
Yeah, so I didn't follow this series as closely, but like you said, I think it's shaping up to be one of the most competitive series in these playoffs. Just to do a quick recap, the Celtics took the first 2 games at home against the Wizards. In the first game, they hit 19 threes and shot 48% from the 3-point line. And in Game 2, Isaiah Thomas had a monster 53-point game. However, the Wizards bounced back in Game 3 and blew the Celtics out without John Wall. And Otto Porter Jr. and Bojan Bogdanovic, they both had really big games for Washington, chipping in 19 points each. And the Wizards also won Game 4 at home, going on a 26-0 run in the third quarter. In Game 5, back in Boston, Avery Bradley had a huge performance, scoring 29 points. And the Wizards answered by winning Game 6, 92-91, off of a John Wall game-winning three-pointer. So this series has really gone back and forth, and it's really one of the more competitive and compelling series to watch in these playoffs. But I think the key for Washington going forward in Game 7 is going to be the rebounding. And all three of their wins in the series, the Wizards out-rebounded the Celtics by 9 or more. So if the Wizards can dominate the glass and play solid perimeter defense to limit the Celtics' three-point shooting, I think they have a good chance of taking Game 7. However, it's Game 7 in Boston, and if Isaiah Thomas has another monster game, the Celtics still have a chance as well. I'm going to take Washington.
I can't say I disagree. I mean, I think I might go Boston in this one just because, just to play it safe. But I will say this. I mean, you could definitely argue that Washington honestly could have swept this series at this point. Like those first two games, like they were up going down the stretch, and then it just really took like Isaiah Thomas sort of like coming through in the clutch while John Wall wasn't able to hit his shots for the Celtics to come back and win those two. Now, that being said, I mean, that really is a testament to how good Isaiah Thomas is. I mean, he's arguably the best player in the East, not named LeBron James. That being said, I will say what the Wizards need in order to win, not only do they need to have a rebounding advantage, but they also need good performances again from Otto Porter and Bojan Bogdanovic. I mean, like those two are really going to be the X factor for the Wizards going into this game and also throughout the rest of the playoffs. I mean, like with John Wall and Bradley Beal, what you see is what you get, which is one of the best 1-2 punches at the guard position in the NBA right now. Marcin Gortat really at this point, he's just focused on getting rebounds. Same with one of the Morris twins that they have. I don't remember which one that they have. I think it's Markieff, right? I mean, he also is very much focused on getting rebounds. And so really what they need is that extra scoring punch from that small forward position. And that's what Otto and Bojan contribute. So we'll see what happens going forward. I still say Celtics just because, again, Isaiah Thomas is so good. And not only that, I mean, like they still have a very talented roster around him with Al Horford and Avery Bradley. Jay Crowder's also pretty good. I mean, Kelly Olynyk can go away. I dislike that guy so much. I still think the Celtics are much, much better.
Dang, you're Team Oubre then. Interesting. I think I'm Team Olynyk, but I think it's been a great series to watch. I think it's clear that Washington has a better starting five, but the Celtics have more depth on the bench. And John Wall, it's just, if you haven't watched any of the series, like you need to watch John Wall because his frontline speed when he's in the open court, it's just a blur. And he's going by other guards like they're standing still. And he's elevated his game to top 3-point guard, I want to say, because before he always had the speed, but he can now hit his jump shot more consistently, and he's finding guys underneath the basket a lot more consistently. And so in the end, I still think Boston's going to win. I think them being at home with the crowd on their edge, it always helps the bench guys and kind of the role players to be at home. And so I'm going to pick them to win. But Washington, they have all the potential, as we talked about coming forward. If they just need to get some more frontline depth, that younger and more explosive. I mean, those two guards, Wall and Beal, it's just Beal struggled with his shot in Game 6, but I mean, if he can get on fire and John Wall can continue doing what he's doing, I could see them easily winning Game 7. And I actually think that the Wizards have more of a shot against Cleveland. Just the talent on that team, I think, could pose more of a threat against the Cavs, because although the Celtics are a better overall team, we've seen what talent does to good coached teams this playoffs. The talent just overwhelms. And so which team do you think has a better shot against Cleveland in the next round?
To me personally, I think the Wizards, they have the better chance of really competing with the Cavs, because the Cavs, they've dominated the Celtics during the regular season, and sort of like the Toronto Raptors, I feel that the Celtics, they don't believe they can really beat this Cleveland team. And the Wizards, I think they have a better chance of possibly taking the series to 6 games against the Cavs. Now, the Cavs won the season series 2-1, but one of the Cavs wins was thanks to a LeBron hitting a miracle fadeaway three-pointer at the end of regulation to send that game into overtime, which the Cavs would end up winning 140-135. And in my opinion, was the best regular season game. But Washington can definitely run with the Cavs, but however, to beat the Cavs in a 7-game series, John Wall and Bradley Beal really need to show up every night for the Wizards to have any chance. If one of them have an off night, I don't know if the Wizards supporting cast, including Otto Porter and Bojan Bogdanovic, I don't know if they'll have enough firepower to really overcome the Cavs offense. So regardless of who comes out of the Celtics series, I think the Cavs are going to take the series in either 5 or 6 games and meet the Warriors in the finals.
Agreed. I think whoever wins this series is probably going to lose to the Cavs, and at most 5 games. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this also is a sweep. That being said, I will say that I also agree that the Wizards would probably give the Cavs the most amount of trouble, or they have the potential to give the Cavs the most amount of trouble, just because, again, like, they have so much. I feel they have more scoring depth actually going into the series. And if everything goes right, and if not only Bradley Beal and John Wall go off, but you have Otto Porter and Bojan going off, and then you have Markieff Morris miraculously hitting all the shots, and Marcin Gortat is getting the offensive rebounds and scoring there. And that's the other thing too, is that as much as I like Tristan Thompson, and as decent as like Kevin Love is, as well as an interior post guy, I mean, that's something that this Cavs team has kind of struggled with this season. I mean, granted, they haven't struggled enough so that it's not like such a big weakness for them, but they do struggle a little bit, and especially against a team that I feel has the better center. I think that might pose just enough of a problem that this Wizards team can take 1 to 2 games from the Cavs. But I don't think it's going to be enough to get over that. I think we're really headed for a third rematch in a row between the Warriors and the Cavs.
Yeah, the one note, I guess, for Boston is I think that they have the player that can somewhat slow down LeBron James in Jay Crowder, who's a good defender. But I don't see anybody on Washington. Otto Porter, I think, is just going to be overmatched against LeBron. Kelly Oubre has no shot. Markieff Morris maybe has a shot, but I think that would be the one thing for Boston, is that they have Jay Crowder, who can match up size-wise and physical-wise with LeBron James, that I don't think the Wizards have. But I think Cleveland wins regardless. Anything else, you guys?
I'm really looking forward to the draft lottery this year. So.
Oh yeah, that's Tuesday night, right?
Yeah.
Mavs have a 5% chance, right?
Or I think they have like a 2% chance of getting number 1 overall, and then maybe like 5% of getting top 3. I mean, this is supposed to be one of the best draft classes in a while, like arguably up there with 2003. So I mean, like, if we can move up, that would be amazing. But even if we stay put pat at like 9th overall, or even move back maybe 1 spot, still I think this is really like you have basically, obviously you have the top tier, but then you have like the second tier, and that lasts all the way up until like the 10th overall pick. I mean, if we drop out of the 10th overall, then we just have to hope that someone that I would say is up there with the rest of the top 10 prospects drops, or if they're able to identify someone that's going to be good. But I mean, the problem with that being is that I feel like it's basically you have the top 10, which is going to be a mixture of like combo forwards and specifically point guards, but also you have Malik Monk. But after that, it's just basically like power forwards nonstop, 24/7. And from like 10 to 25, including one of whom is Jarrett Allen, UT Longhorn in there. But that being said, I mean, it's going to be hard for the Mavs to really mess this up. I mean, they could even like trade away the pick need be if they aren't in love with anyone that's available. I mean, it's just going to be real interesting to see what the Mavs do.
Hey, I want to thank Kevin for coming on. Thank you so much for the insight, and we'll have you back on for the NBA Finals.
Yeah, thanks for coming by, man.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's move on to baseball. How are the Texas Rangers doing? They're on a bit of a winning streak.
Yeah, they're doing slightly better. They now have won 4 in a row, specifically against the San Diego Padres. As we all know, is run by a former Rangers exec who depleted the entire farm system there. But to start off the week, they lost to the Mariners 1-2. More of the same. They had some great starting pitching, as always. And then just the bullpen just completely blew it. I mean, Dyson is just awful and just needs to I don't know what to do with him. You also had Leclerc going on the DL, and he's been your best bullpen piece. And they should have put him on the DL earlier than they did, especially since they barely used him. But that's neither here nor there. I mean, at this point, this team really if this team has any hope of contending, they really need to revamp that bullpen with trades, or I mean, if they can't do that, or if they're not unwilling to do that, then they might as well just sell off, because this bullpen is just actively a detriment to this Rangers team, game to game. And also, another problem with this team has been just like the inability to get hits. I mean, they had 6 games in a row where they were struck out 10 times, and that's just not good. I mean, this really does kind of remind me a bit of the mid 2000s Rangers teams that had like great power, but just like everything else, they just couldn't. They were not a consistent hitting team. But yeah, I mean, obviously we'll see what happens if they can turn that ship around. But they were able to win a home and home series against the Padres 3-1. Again, the offense was very inconsistent, but they were able to turn around, I believe, the second game of the series, where they got a complete game shutout from AJ Griffin, as well as racking up the runs. I believe 11-0 that second game, and then they were able to take the rest of it going forward with 2 walk-off wins of the last 2 games, one by Napoli, the other by Gallo. But really, the story going forward is just, again, the starting pitching has been the saving grace of this team. I mean, the production they've been able to get out of Cashner and AJ Griffin have been just complete, utter shocks, but in the most pleasant way. And obviously, you have Darvish. I mean, the big problem going forward now is like Cole Hamels has gone down, and he's going to be out for at least a month or two. And so, I mean, you just have to hope that that can hold up for the rest of during that time, especially as we wait to get Tyson Ross also back, and hopefully he's able to perform just as well as Cashner and Griffin. But I mean, this team is really behind the 8 ball everywhere else. That's the thing too, is like this team is like, I mean, at least starting the week, they were last in the AL West, but they were first in the AL in quality starts with 23. They were second in quality start percentage in 61%, and then they were third in average game score and second in starters ERA, as well as second in batting average against with a .236. It's just the peripherals again have not been great. I mean, another big problem with this team that I've noticed is that they give up so many walks. I mean, obviously you have Darvish, but then you also look at like Andrew Cashner, who has more walks than strikeouts. I mean, Perez has about the same number as walks as strikeouts. Even I think Griffin has struggled a little bit, but I think if I remember correctly, Griffin might actually be the best out of the rest of the starters in terms of strikeout to walk ratio. But I mean, at the end of the day, like, I mean, this team really needs to just find some consistency in the bullpen. I mean, this has just really been terrible, and like, honestly, like, I mean, I'm not saying that the Rangers should be first in beating out the Astros, but I mean, like, they should at least be like, if they had decent bullpen pitching, this team would be at least .500. But I mean, because of the terrible bullpen pitching that they've had to start the season, specifically with Sam Dyson, it's just they're behind the 8 ball, and they've really got to start outperforming right now. I mean, I've seen it talked about that like by the All-Star break they need to be like above 0.500 by at least like 5 to 6 games. And I mean, like that's going to take at least, I don't remember the specific number, but like they have to win out by at least like 12 games, I feel, in order to at least get to that point. And I don't know if this team has it. We'll see. In all fairness, the bullpen has been able to slowly start rebounding. I mean, granted, part of it might also be the fact they were just gassed from the week prior. But I mean, obviously, the complete game shutout by AJ Griffin has helped. I mean, Dyson has been playing a bit better, with only 2 earned runs given up in the last 7 1/3 innings pitched. But again, I mean, you don't know if he's going to turn back into like beginning of season Dyson. Bush has really settled in nicely as the closer. I mean, again, like you also have to watch out with him in terms of just like, especially since this is only his second season as a bona fide major league reliever. But you also have been getting some good production out of Claudio. I mean, he had a spot start last week, but I mean, he's sort of someone that does it all. Like, not only is he's a left-handed pitcher, so you can put him in as sort of your loogie, but he can go multiple innings as your like long reliever, and also as like someone that if you need someone to like set up like your closer, or to maybe even like shut down a rally, Alex Claudio could definitely be the guy you do. So I mean, like he at least gives you some versatility, which is something this bullpen sorely needs. And so we'll see how that goes. Offense also itself is beginning to turn around. Napoli has a 0.548 slugging average in May. Lucroy also himself, he has a slash of 0.375, 0.444, and 0.531 in May. At least sort of coming back around. Even though I still would say like Robinson Chirinos has been as productive, if not more so than Lucroy has. Odor has been hitting better since May 3rd, and Chu has been getting on base as was hoped for when we signed him. Gallo is striking out a ton, 40%, but I mean he's still mashing just like last night. So that's been nice to see. Really, the only concern has been Gomez. But yeah, that's pretty much about it.
I think the Rangers are benefiting from a soft spot in their schedule. They had San Diego, then they play Oakland, Philadelphia, and then Detroit coming up next week. So that's a lot of mediocre to bad teams that they should be able to load up on. But let's talk about the best team in the majors, the Houston Astros. The best 36-game start in franchise history. They're 25-11, which is ridiculous to think about. They've won 69% of their baseball games, which is off the charts. Last week, they beat the Angels in Anaheim. They won a series 2-1. Then they swept the Braves. The notable note from that series was Carlos Beltran, 40-year-old, facing 43-year-old Bartolo Colon, and Beltran won the battle of the old guys as he hit a homer off of him. Colon's just getting his checks at this point. He's been horrible for the Braves. And they so far have won the first 2 in New York against the Yankees. Carlos Correa is really heating up. We've mentioned that the last couple of weeks, but he's hit 4 homers and 10 doubles in his last 17 games. And I want to talk about the defense because that's something that we haven't really talked about too much, but I think the Astros are an underrated defensive team because Jose Altuve is great at second base. Correa and Bregman on the left side of that infield it doesn't get much better than that. And then in the outfield, you have Josh Reddick gotten a lot of wall catches out there, but also George Springer and Nori Aoki in left field, I think, is leading the majors in outfield assists. Jake Marisnick, we know that he's a defensive whiz when he was playing in center field, but he threw out the tying run for the final out in Game 1 Thursday night. So I mean, this team has gotten great starting pitching, specifically from Dallas Keuchel, who's a Cy Young candidate, and he won again this past week. Lance McCullers has really stepped it up, and he had 6 scoreless innings last night in the Bronx. And the bullpen has been outstanding. The offense has been the top in the league, and also defensively, they're good. So this team is just top to bottom, just outstanding in every area. And I know it's still early in May, but they already have an 8-game league in the American League West. And so this is, I mean, it's just setting up for a summer where it might just be cruising to the finish line. The only issues I would say with this team is I think eventually they might want to get another starting pitcher, because I think the back end with Mike Fiers, Charlie Morton, who granted has been really good, and Joe Musgrove has been really up and down. I think they could use an upgrade there. And then also, I guess their bullpen has been good, but the closer situation, Ken Giles has been really inconsistent. Some nights he strikes out the side on 9 pitches. Some nights he just gets into trouble like immediately off the bat. And so they might end up, if there's a closer on the market, i.e. a Aroldis Chapman last year for the Cubs, who really elevated them to be the World Series champs. I think they might be able to get arm in the bullpen, especially to close. Chris Davinsky has been outstanding, so they could try him there, but I just think he's their long reliever guy. He can pitch multiple innings, and so I think limiting him to a 1-inning closer role would be kind of a detriment to what he's done. Brad Peacock, I don't think is the answer. He might actually end up going in the rotation if the back end continues to struggle. And Lou Gregerson and Will Harris, while they're really good in middle relief, they've both struggled in the past at a closer for the team. And so that's the one big thing, along with the starting pitching. I just think that offensively it doesn't get much better than what they're getting from Altuve and Correa and Springer and Beltran, Gaddis, McCann, who hit a 3-run homer last night. It's so relieving as a Houston fan to go from the putrid way the Rockets season ended, and you turn on the Astros game and you see Jake Marisnick throw out Jacoby Ellsbury to win the game in the bottom of the ninth. So I'm so thankful for the Houston Astros. This upcoming week, they were rained out today in the Bronx, so they're going to play a day-night doubleheader tomorrow against the Yankees, and then they're going to go down to Miami to face the Marlins, and then a big series next weekend against the Cleveland Indians back at Minute Maid Park.
So let's move on to shoutouts now. Specifically, I want to talk about the Dallas Stars. They made some big moves this week. So first, let's start off with with the NBA, the NHL playoffs, because this actually ties into the Stars. First, we'll sit shoutouts to Pittsburgh for continuing the misery of the Washington Capitals, which I mean I really, really, really hate seeing, but it happens. The Penguins have further proved that that God is not merciful, because they keep winning and the Caps keep losing. So they'll now be facing the Ottawa Senators in the Eastern Conference Finals, while in the West we'll have the Nashville Predators going against the Anaheim Ducks, who beat the young up-and-coming Edmonton Oilers in 7 games, which ties back into the Stars, who then get the Anaheim Ducks first-round pick due to a trade clause, which basically said if they made it to the Western Conference Finals, along with a few other things that were already met, then they get Anaheim's first-round pick, and so now they'll have two first-round picks in this year's draft, along with a very early second-round draft pick. And so it's going to be interesting to see how they go forward with that, and whether or not they might just package it with like maybe a prospect or a few other picks in order to get some help right away. But bigger news this week is that the Stars, not only did they trade for the rights to talk to a goalie, but they ended up signing said goalie to a 6-year, $29.5 million contract, which actually works out to a little less than $5 million a year average contract, which is actually very good for this team, considering how Kari Lehtinen is right now being paid pretty much $1 million more a season. Although obviously his contract ends at the end of this season, but. Basically, the goalie they did sign was Ben Bishop, who prior to the season was considered one of the elite goalies out there. He was two out of the last 3 years prior to this year. He was a Vezina finalist, which basically means that he was one of the top 3 goalies, or considered one of the top 3 goalies in the league. And so hopefully we see more of that going forward than we did necessarily what happened last year. And even then, this past year, he was actually still one of the top goalies when it came to killing the power play. He just sort of struggled with at even strength, which is basically when everyone's on the ice. So the big problem with him is just like whether or not he can help sort of cover up for how young this defensive core is going to be going forward. We'll see. I mean, it's also just going to be interesting to see how the Stars go about with the offseason, especially with the expansion draft looming overhead and basically them having to probably lose one player on their roster no matter what. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, for me, shout out to MLS and the Houston Dynamo, who won twice since the last podcast. They beat Orlando City FC 4-0 last week, and they beat Vancouver Whitecaps 2-1 last night. And they're actually now first place in the West with 19 points through 10 games. Granted, the schedule has been very friendly to them. They've played 7 of 10 games at home, and they've won 6 of their 7 home games. And so that's really why they're first in the West. They are winless in 3 games on the road. And so they have 2 games upcoming this week at Philly and at Atlanta. And so we'll see if they can take their scoring prowess at home on the road. It's really just been 2 different teams. At home, they are a counter-attacking juggernaut, and they defend really well. At home, on the road, they can't get possession of the ball. They can't get the ball to their forwards. They can't get consistent scoring chances. And then defensively, they're completely a mess on the road. And so it's strange how their home road splits. We talked about Ryan Anderson's home road splits, but the Dynamo as well. And SC Dallas is actually second in the West as well. They have 18 points, and they play a big match tomorrow night against New York City FC and David Villa in primetime on FS1 at 7. So it's Sunday night football in Frisco. Okay, so I want you guys to visit our website, twonatesonsports.com. Also, like us on Facebook at 2natesonsports. We are 1 like away from 30, so please like that if you listen to the pod and want to get our latest updates throughout the week. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music, where you'll get a notification as soon as we release our new episodes. Nathan, I will talk to you next week.
Talk to you then, man.